Commander Zara Voss stared out the observation window of the Aegis, watching the chaos unfold in the vastness of space. On the screen, the Syrix warship, a sleek and angular monstrosity, blasted through the vacuum, its energy cannons firing with brutal precision. "They're underestimating us," Zara thought, her fingers gripping the railing. Her mind raced, calculating angles, anticipating the Syrix's next move. "They think they can destroy us like they did the Cranks. But they've never faced humanity." "Commander, their shields are still holding strong," Lieutenant Noah Cade's voice broke through her focus. He stood beside her, eyes glued to his console, his face tight with the strain of their first real engagement. The youthful brashness that usually marked his demeanor had disappeared, replaced by the sharp, calculating edge of a soldier in combat. "I know, Lieutenant." Zara's voice was steady, betraying none of the anxiety clawing at the back of her mind. "We'll need to hit them where it hurts." The Syrix had come to Earth with a single goal: to crush humanity under the weight of their superior firepower. The Council had received their first warning only hours ago, an unprovoked attack on an unarmed Terran colony on Mars. No demands. No communication. Just violence. Zara's stomach twisted at the memory of the brief transmission before the colony went silent. "We have arrived. Resistance is futile." Futile. The word echoed in Zara's mind, but instead of feeling the weight of fear, something within her hardened. She knew her people. "We'll make them regret that." Cade glanced at her, his voice low. "You sure we can push them back? The Aegis is strong, but their ship, it's far beyond anything we've encountered before." Zara's eyes narrowed. "They think we fight like the Cranks. That's their mistake." She turned to face him, her expression unwavering. "Humanity doesn't follow rules. We make them." The lieutenant hesitated but nodded, his fingers already moving across the console to relay her orders. Zara's mind was already on the next step. She needed to keep the Syrix off balance. To make them doubt. Human ingenuity had always been their greatest weapon. Against all odds, they'd triumphed over empires, faced invaders stronger than their own, and built their civilization from the ashes of adversity. The Syrix wouldn't break them. Not today. The Aegis shuddered as another wave of enemy fire struck the hull. Zara's hand clenched into a fist. "Deploy the decoy drones. Make them think we're pulling back." A flare of light erupted from the flagship, streaking across the void as Zara's fleet dispersed. The Syrix took the bait, following the false readings that led them into the trap. Zara's eyes flickered toward Cade's console, watching as the lieutenant initiated the counterstrike. "Now, Lieutenant!" Zara ordered, her voice a sharp command. The Aegis surged forward, its weapon systems fully engaged. The enemy warship tried to adjust its trajectory, but it was too late. With a loud, reverberating crack, the Aegis unleashed a salvo of missiles that collided with the Syrix ship's weak point. The explosion sent a ripple of energy cascading through the battlefield, lighting the dark expanse in a burst of fiery brilliance. For a moment, Zara allowed herself a brief exhale. The Syrix flagship had taken a hit. But just as quickly, her relief turned to dread. "Commander, the Syrix are activating their secondary weapons, shield disruptors." Cade shouted. "We need to pull back, now." Zara's mind raced. The Syrix were adapting far quicker than anticipated. Their technology wasn't just advanced, it was unpredictable. They'd anticipated some form of retaliation, but they hadn't expected humanity to fight like this. "No," Zara said, her voice low and resolute. "We're not pulling back. They need to understand that when they provoke humanity, they don't just face a superior enemy, they face a species that will not back down, no matter the odds." The Aegis lurched again, this time with greater force, as a beam of concentrated energy tore through the ship's starboard side. Alarms blared. The crew scrambled, trying to regain control, but the damage was catastrophic. "Status report." Zara barked. Cade's fingers danced across his console, his brow furrowed in concentration. "We're losing power to the starboard engines, shields are down to 30%. We need to." Zara cut him off. No. Keep the pressure on them. We're not retreating. Not until they know the price of their arrogance. She turned back to the observation window, her eyes narrowing. The Syrix flagship was closing in, preparing for a final strike. This would be a battle to the death, or a victory that would change the galaxy forever. Cade, Zara said, her voice calm but laced with purpose. I want all weapons to target their propulsion systems. It's the only way we're getting out of this. Cade's eyes met hers, his uncertainty replaced by the same unwavering resolve. Yes, ma'am. Zara's gaze remained fixed on the approaching enemy ship. In the cold expanse of space, every move mattered. Every second could mean life or death. But one thing was certain, humanity was not going down quietly. The war had just begun. And the Syrix had made a fatal mistake. Cliffhanger ending. As Zara issued the final orders, the Aegis shuddered violently once more. The lights flickered, and a shrill alarm pierced the air. Something's wrong. Her heart skipped a beat. Before she could react, an unexpected explosion rocked the ship. The view from the observation window shifted, the Syrix flagship was no longer the only threat. Emerging from the darkness, an unknown fleet, even larger than the Syrix, loomed in the distance. Zara's blood ran cold. This wasn't just an attack. It was a signal. And humanity had just been marked for extinction. Zara Voss stood at the command center of the Aegis, her mind racing as she surveyed the tactical data streaming across her console. The Syrix flagship was a mere speck in the distance now, its energy signatures flickering weakly after their devastating assault, but Zara knew better than to celebrate too soon. The real danger had just emerged. Behind her, Lieutenant Noah Cade worked frantically, his fingers flying over the holographic interface. His face was pale, sweat trickling down his temple despite the chill in the air. Zara could feel the weight of his tension, mirrored by every crew member around her. No one was speaking. No one needed to. The new fleet that had appeared on the edge of the solar system wasn't just another wave of reinforcements, it was something else entirely. Something far worse. What are we dealing with, Lieutenant? Zara's voice was calm, yet the urgency behind it was unmistakable. Cade's eyes darted to her before he quickly returned to the screen. I'm not sure, Commander. They're not Syrix ships. They're not anything I've seen before. He paused, his fingers hovering over the controls. The ship's signatures are unfamiliar. But I can tell one thing, they're massive. At least 3 times the size of the Syrix flagship. Zara's stomach churned. 3 times the size. She exhaled slowly, trying to suppress the wave of panic threatening to rise. Do they have any weapons online? She asked, already knowing the answer but needing confirmation. Yes, Cade replied, voice tight. Their energy levels are spiking. They're gearing up for a full-scale attack. He glanced up at her, his eyes wide. Commander, we're outgunned. Even if we had full shields, we'd still be outmatched. Zara was silent for a moment, processing the information. The Aegis had been built to fight, but not this. This was something entirely new. Humanity had survived invasion after invasion, often outsmarting its enemies with sheer determination and wit, but this was different. The Syrix fleet wasn't the only threat, Zara muttered to herself, the weight of the truth settling heavily on her shoulders. They were just the messengers. Cade looked at her, brow furrowing. Messengers? Then who the hell are these guys? Zara didn't answer immediately. Instead, she turned, walking toward the tactical map displayed on the far wall. The ships were positioned in a perfect, tight formation, an unmistakable sign of strategic military might. Whoever they were prepared for war. I don't know, she said, her voice low but resolute. But they've come to finish what the Syrix started. And we need to make them regret it. There was a moment of silence as everyone in the command center processed her words. The crew members were used to orders, but they'd never faced an enemy like this. Zara's command was all they had. She had no intention of running. Set a course to intercept them, Zara said, her gaze never leaving the enemy fleet's formation. We'll meet them head-on. The room exploded into action as Cade relayed her orders. The Aegis shook slightly as the engines powered up, but the crew was already in motion, securing their stations, preparing for what was to come. Zara's thoughts turned inward for a brief moment. Who are you? She could feel the pressure building, both from the unknown enemy and from the weight of the command she held. There was no choice but to face them. This wasn't just about humanity's survival anymore. This was about something much bigger. Something far beyond the reaches of her understanding. Commander, they're hailing us, Cade's voice broke into her thoughts. Zara's heart skipped a beat. They were already trying to make contact. They hadn't even fired a shot yet. She turned sharply toward Cade. Put it through, she ordered, her voice steely. A holographic screen flickered to life in front of her. A figure appeared, clad in dark armor that shimmered with an unnatural sheen. Their face was obscured, but their eyes gleamed through the helmet, cold and calculating. Zara's blood ran cold. This is a warning, human, the figure said, voice smooth, yet menacing. You have no place in the cosmos. Submit to our will, and your species will be spared. Resist, and you will be destroyed, as the Syrix will soon be. Zara's lips curled into a thin smile, her gaze never wavering. I'll take that as a no. The figure's eyes narrowed, but before they could speak again, Zara cut the communication. Prepare to engage, she said, her voice tight with resolve. The crew's movements quickened as the Aegis swung into formation. There was no longer any question of diplomacy. This was war. And humanity had never been one to lie down and die without a fight. As the ship turned toward the oncoming fleet, the tension in the air became palpable. Cade shot Zara a look, a mixture of fear and awe. Do you think we stand a chance? Zara met his gaze, her expression unwavering. We always do. The unknown fleet loomed closer, their massive ships gliding with terrifying precision. As the distance between them closed, Zara's heart pounded in her chest. The stakes had never been higher. But there was one thing she knew, no matter how powerful their enemies were, they had never faced a species like humanity. And they wouldn't survive it. Cliffhanger ending, suddenly, the enemy fleet's ship shifted. A massive energy beam cut through space, aimed directly at the Aegis. The blinding flash illuminated everything in its path. Zara's eyes went wide as the ship rocked violently, alarms blaring throughout the command center. Brace for impact, she shouted, gripping the console tightly. The world seemed to stretch in slow motion as the beam closed in. Then, the screen went black. The Aegis shook violently as the blinding energy beam tore through the space around it. Sparks flew from the consoles, and alarms blared with deafening intensity. Zara Voss gripped the nearest rail, her body thrown against the cold metal as the ship groaned under the strain. The blinding flash lingered, leaving a ghostly afterimage in her vision. Damage report. Zara shouted over the cacophony, her voice sharp and commanding despite the chaos. Shields are down. Hull integrity at 45%. We've lost power to the port side, and the aft engines are offline. Cade's voice crackled through the comm, but even through the static, Zara could hear the urgency in his tone. His hands flew across the controls, trying to stabilize the ship. Zara's heart pounded. The Aegis was damaged, badly, but it wasn't beyond saving. Not yet. She couldn't let panic set in. Not now. Can we return fire? She asked, her eyes scanning the console for any glimmer of hope. We're locked out of several weapons systems, Cade responded, frustration evident in his voice. I'm bypassing the safeties, but we're not at full capacity. Zara's fingers drummed on the arm of her chair as she thought quickly. The Syrix fleet was still reeling from the last strike, but the new enemy was closing in fast. The odds were narrowing by the second, and every moment of hesitation could be their last. Divert power to the forward laser banks, she ordered, her voice steady. Target the largest ship in that fleet and fire as soon as we're in range. Cade hesitated. You sure about this? That ship is. I said fire, Lieutenant. Zara cut him off. Her gaze never wavered from the tactical display, watching as the enemy fleet's massive warships loomed closer. We don't have a choice. As the ship groaned again, the lights flickering in the command center, Zara's thoughts went to her crew, their faces, the soldiers who had volunteered for this mission. She could feel their determination, their resilience. Humanity's greatest strength wasn't their technology. It was their spirit. And that spirit would carry them through this. She had to believe that. Commander, Cade's voice interrupted her thoughts, now tinged with something darker. The enemy ships, they're not just armed. They're locking onto our position. I think they've made us a priority target. Zara's chest tightened. They want to make an example of us, she muttered. No one makes an example of humanity. The Aegis lurched again as a second wave of enemy fire hit the ship. This time, Zara felt it, more like a punch than a jolt. The ship rattled, and her vision blurred for a moment. Status. Zara barked, the words cutting through the haze. We've lost the main comm array. Cade shouted. We're flying blind, Commander. We won't be able to contact the fleet, if there even is a fleet left. Zara gritted her teeth, ignoring the rush of panic threatening to choke her. She couldn't afford to fall apart. Focus on getting us back in the fight, Lieutenant. We're not dead yet. But, Cade's protests died in his throat as Zara's sharp gaze cut through him. He hesitated for only a second before nodding, his fingers resuming their frenetic work. The ship groaned under the strain, but Zara's determination never wavered. We're going to need a miracle to survive this, she muttered to herself. The thought was sobering, but it didn't frighten her. If anything, it ignited something deeper within her, a fire that only came to life when humanity's back was against the wall. Without warning, the tactical display flashed red. The Aegis was in the crosshairs of the enemy fleet. Zara's breath caught in her throat. Brace for impact, she shouted, her command ringing out across the deck. The impact came almost instantly, a sickening thud that rattled through every bone in her body. The ship shuddered, and then, as if a weight had lifted, the feeling of inertia disappeared. The Aegis had been knocked into a full spin. Cade's voice cracked over the intercom. We're spinning out of control, Commander. The stabilizers are gone. I can't get us back on course. The lights flickered again. Alarms blared, echoing like a chorus of doom. Zara's mind raced, but her body was already acting on instinct. She stormed to the helm, grabbing the controls from Cade. No time to fix it, Zara said through gritted teeth. We've got to fight, now. Cade's hand rested on the console, his knuckles white. You're asking us to fight blind, he said, his voice almost a whisper. I'm asking us to survive, Zara snapped back, her gaze never leaving the tactical screen. They had moments, maybe seconds, before the next wave of fire came. The unknown fleet was relentless, and the Aegis was dying. The thought of surrender didn't even cross her mind. It never would. With a quick flick of the wrist, she diverted power to the emergency thrusters. The Aegis lurched forward, violently correcting its spin, but the ship was still a sitting duck. Still, Zara's eyes shone with the fire of someone who had already resolved to see this through, no matter the cost. Lieutenant, she said, her voice low but unwavering, get us in range. Now. Cade's eyes widened, but he didn't argue. He nodded once, a fierce resolve replacing the doubt in his eyes. Aye, Commander. As the ship lurched once more, Zara gripped the console with white-knuckled hands, her breath steadying. A new wave of enemy fire was incoming, and this time, they weren't going to miss. The battle had just begun. Cliffhanger ending, just as the Aegis steadied, a flicker on the radar caught Zara's attention. A new signal was appearing on the edge of their sensors, something small but incredibly fast, closing in fast. Who the hell is that? Cade whispered. Zara's heart skipped a beat as the shape became clearer. A fleet? No. A ship. But it was no ordinary vessel. Brace yourself, Zara said, her voice a low growl. The silhouette of the incoming ship finally came into full view, and Zara's blood turned to ice. The logo on its hull, a bold, crimson insignia, was unmistakable. It was human. The Aegis trembled under another barrage of fire. Zara's teeth clenched as the ship lurched, sparks flying from the console in front of her. She could taste the bitter tang of burnt circuitry in the air, and the hiss of failing systems echoed through the ship's interior. Her hands gripped the helm tighter. Status. Zara barked, every word cutting through the chaos like a blade. Cade's voice, strained but determined, filled the cockpit. Hull integrity down to 25%, Commander. We're not going to last much longer at this rate. Zara's eyes flickered to the tactical display. The enemy ships were closing in, their heavy weapons charging for another strike. She could see it clearly, a wave of destruction aimed directly at the Aegis. They were outmatched, outgunned. But she refused to surrender. The door to the command center slammed open, and Lieutenant Korsh stepped in, his face pale, sweat dripping down his forehead. Commander, there's something you need to see. What is it? Zara demanded, her eyes still on the screen. There's a signal. A fleet, Korsh said breathlessly. But it's not like anything we've ever encountered. Zara's heart skipped a beat. What do you mean, not like anything we've encountered? He hesitated, looking at Cade before answering. It's human. For a long, stunned moment, silence reigned. Zara's mind reeled. Human? Impossible. There shouldn't have been any human ships in this quadrant, not after what the Syrix had done. Not after the war that nearly wiped out everything. But then the communication console beeped, and Zara's heart surged with cautious hope. A new signal was coming through, a direct channel. Put it on, Zara ordered, her voice tight with the weight of the situation. The screen flickered, then solidified into a sharp image. A familiar face appeared, though one Zara hadn't seen in years, Admiral Aaron Hayes. Her sharp features were grim, her eyes steely with resolve. Zara Voss, Hayes said, her voice calm but unmistakably serious. I hope you're ready for reinforcements, because you're going to need them. Zara's breath caught. Admiral Hayes. How? Why? Long story, Hayes replied, giving a wry smile. But you don't have time for it. You've been targeted, Commander, and I've got a fleet standing by to help you get out of this. Zara exhaled sharply, a wave of relief washing over her, but it was fleeting. We can't just run. We need to finish this fight. Hayes raised an eyebrow. And you will. But not without help. I've been tracking Syrix movements for the last few weeks. They're gathering forces, preparing for something big, but right now, it's your move. I've got a full battalion of Aurora-class cruisers in range. You're not alone anymore. Zara's gaze shifted to the tactical map, her fingers tapping a rapid beat on the console. The Syrix fleet was still formidable, but with human reinforcements, there was a chance for victory. The Syrix had underestimated humanity before. They wouldn't make that mistake again. All right, Zara said, her voice a low growl. We'll fight. We'll win. Good. Then we're aligned. Sending reinforcements now. Get your crew ready for battle. Zara's eyes flickered to Korsh and Cade, both of them watching her. Their faces were grim, but there was something else too, something that hadn't been there before. A glimmer of hope. We fight together, as we always have, Zara said, the words firm and resolute. No one else gets to decide our fate. With a sharp nod from Korsh, he turned to the crew, issuing commands. Zara turned back to the console, her mind already calculating their next move. Every decision mattered now. Every maneuver. She wasn't just fighting for survival anymore, she was fighting for humanity's future. For the future of her people. Admiral, we're ready, Zara said, her voice steady, unwavering. Then let's show them what happens when they pick the wrong species, Hayes replied. The communication ended, and Zara stood, moving with precision as she issued commands to the crew. The Aegis shuddered one last time, and then the hum of engines began to resonate through the ship again. The damage had been severe, but not fatal. Zara wouldn't let it be. "Status?" Zara asked, turning to Cade, her voice now a controlled force. "We've re-established power to the shields. Weapons are online," Cade reported, his voice barely masking his excitement. Zara's heart beat in time with the pulsing energy surrounding the ship. She looked at Kor, who nodded in affirmation. "Time to make our stand." With the fleet of Aurora-class cruisers now in position, Zara's pulse quickened. It wasn't just about fighting off the Syrix anymore. This was about sending a message. Humanity had always been underestimated, pushed to the edge. But now, they were fighting back, not just for their survival, but for the future of the galaxy. The Syrix had declared war on the wrong species. Zara's fingers hovered over the command controls. The time for hesitation had passed. "Fire," she commanded, her voice cutting through the tension of the moment. The Aegis's weapon systems roared to life, discharging a torrent of fire that tore through the heart of the Syrix fleet. The incoming fire from the enemy ships faltered as their formation broke apart. The reinforcements arrived just in time, bringing a wave of fresh firepower that forced the Syrix back, one ship at a time. But this was only the beginning. Zara's gaze never left the battlefield as she issued new orders, her crew working in perfect unison. Their battle had just begun, but they were no longer outnumbered. No longer fighting alone. They would emerge victorious, and the galaxy would remember who humanity was. And when the last Syrix ship fell from the sky, Zara Voss stood tall at the helm, her eyes fierce with the fire of a species that would never surrender.